So I'll be talking today about a project that was recently completed just at the end of last year, which I guess on a regional scale is quite significant. It was actually a $7 million upgrade to the Moranbah Resource Recovery Centre, which is located in central Queensland. So today I'm going to provide a bit of an overview of the upgrade works that occurred. I'll put it into context. I'll tell you a bit about Moranbah and the council and the local government area itself. I will talk a bit about the scope of the actual upgrade, including the Building Our Regions funding agreement that was obtained. I'll talk about some of the challenges we faced, both during the tender stage, the design stage, and also construction itself. I'll show some photos of the completed facility, some before and after shots. They seem to be popular. And finally, I'll conclude with some of the benefits to the community and council as a result of these upgrades. So I guess the key point that I'll be trying to highlight today is really to showcase what can be achieved in a regional setting. So for those of you who don't know, Moranbah is located within the Isaac Regional Council area. So this is a council that's located, or Moranbah rather, is located around about 1,000 kilometres north of Brisbane and 200 kilometres southwest of Mackay. Moranbah itself is the largest of the towns in the region, which has a population of around 10,000 people. The whole local government area itself is quite large. It's 58,000 square kilometres, which, to put that into some sort of context, that's almost the size of Tasmania, but with only 35,000 full-time equivalent population. So naturally, the region faces a number of waste management challenges, which have been spoken about today. So looking towards the main facility, which is Moranbah, this is a site that traditionally has received waste since around about 1990. And much like many regional council waste facilities, landfilling occurred in a land raise method on natural ground with limited controls for stormwater leachate or managing the environs. There are also very limited facilities on site. The actual transfer station area was limited to sort of informal access roads and stockpile areas for various waste streams. So considering the region is receiving quite a large amount of waste at this facility for the nature of the controls that were there, it was identified that a significant upgrade needed to be undertaken. So around about the time of 2016, Council put in an application to the Building Our Regions program in Queensland, whereby they were successful and they received $3.58 million to upgrade this facility on proviso that Council matched the contribution by the state government. So on the screen here we have a few photos of the facility before the upgrade. On the left-hand side are two photos showing the existing transfer station area. On the top left, you should be able to make out there's a single weighbridge in the background and various bins for recyclables. On the bottom left is three main areas for sorting waste, scrap metal, mattresses, and some green waste in the background. And on the right-hand side, that's the existing unlined landfill facility, which is around about sort of 5 to 10 metres above ground and had a few challenges with the management of stormwater and potential impacts to groundwater. This photo here also shows another perspective of the existing facility. There's a small centre for the management of oil, as well as a number of recycling bins and skips in the background for various sorts of resource recovery. So, having received this funding application, there were two main components to the scope of the upgrade. On one hand, we had the transfer station, and on the other hand, we had the phase 2 landfill. So the transfer station was going to consist of a 6-bay sawtooth transfer station, which would provide benefit to the community in terms of being able to access the site and improve safety on site itself, as well as allowing for some future expansion. On the other hand was the phase 2 landfill, which probably was around 2/3 the value of the project. So the new landfill was designed in accordance with current Queensland good practice, which included a composite lining system and the relevant stormwater and leachate controls. So it was a new stormwater pond, drains, a leachate pond, an automated extraction system, and of course monitoring wells. So this was a relatively large project, not just for council but in the region generally. It's one of the larger regional waste projects I'm aware of in the last couple of years, at least from a landfill and transfer station perspective. And there were some key challenges, and they were related to the funding agreement. And they aren't unique challenges to any project by any means, but they did require some specific controls to be implemented to manage them. And firstly was, of course, budget. It was a clearly defined budget. It was a very large project, and it was important to keep that on track. Secondly was timing. A design for the transfer station had fortunately been completed at the time, but no real work had been done on the new landfill cell itself. So we were in a position where this project needed to be completed within around 12 months, from basically pre-concept all the way to completion of construction. So for anyone who's been involved, I guess, in similar projects, that's quite a challenging time frame. So I guess one of the key things we looked at was how we managed the design and the tender process. I've spoken about this in WasteQ in Queensland before, more on the actual delivery method, but there are a couple of general features here which can be considered for other projects, and that was how we sort of developed the design at the same time as the actual tender was going on. We tendered the detailed design in one package for the transfer station, whilst combining that with only sort of concept level design for the landfill. At the end of the day, it's a hole in the ground, and we have a pretty good understanding of what sort of materials were going to be required and what sort of quantities. So by doing this, we were able to concurrently work on the detailed design whilst the tender phase was actually occurring. In turn, this saved us sort of around 2 to 3 months of the total time for delivering this project in consideration of council procurement times and the like. Once we had our design finished, this sort of aligned with a negotiation stage with the contractors, and we were allowed to award that contract to the preferred contractor for a fixed price based on our final design. I guess another key item or key method we used to bring back the program was early works. This is a really useful tool when you can look at taking small packages of work in particular and tendering them locally. For example, the fencing, clearing and stockpiling materials was something that we could get underway relatively quickly. And this was great because it encouraged the community and smaller local contractors to tender on these portions of work which were more readily suited to their skills. So dealing with a project of this sort of size and magnitude, the next thing to control was budget. So look, it's typical of a consultant to talk about value engineering, but this was very important for this project. And we looked at a few ways to really maximise the local resources. That included using sort of the existing fill materials that were on site, which sounds obvious, but was actually a real challenge considering how sandy and dispersive the material was. We tried to recycle and reuse as much of the site materials as possible, such as the crushed concrete, and we were able to incorporate this into erosion and seg control and also some of the access roads. whilst this was also occurring, we undertook a number of trade-off studies, and these were mostly focused around the lining system itself. The leachate control system in a modern contemporary landfill can be a very large proportion of the cost. So if you can use local materials as much as possible, you can save tens of dollars per tonne off the actual installation price for, say, the leachate drainage layer. So we went around sampling from nearby quarries to identify materials that were readily usable in construction and did the relevant testing such that we could use those materials and ultimately reduce the final price. We coupled this with obviously tender negotiations and a third-party review just to ensure that we identified any relevant changes that could be incorporated in design and again reducing that overall cost. So having got to a point where we could now start construction, we did have a few challenges along the way. This was around March when we started, and for those of you who watch the news, Tropical Cyclone Debbie passed through the region around March of 2017. It devastated the Whitsundays, but it also had some lasting impacts inland as well. Cyclone Debbie actually resulted in what was around 120 mils of rainfall in 24 hours, which on the coast in North Queensland isn't a large amount. But inland, that was actually the highest March rainfall event on record. Couple that with what turned out to be the second wettest March on record, we had a bit of a situation where we had a lot of water and a lot of problems. And what may not seem obvious is how these sort of problems sort of work in two ways. There's the short-term impacts straight away, whereby we had erosion issues, we had quite extensive clean-up, and we had damage to the works that had just commenced. But probably more challenging was the actual long-term impacts of all that water. That water in this particular region of Queensland sat on a shallow layer of bedrock, around about 3 metres below ground, which wasn't an issue until we kept digging it up for the next 6 months. It was very hard to dewater. We had to replace a lot of ground, and this put a lot of pressure on that budget that I come back to. Natural disasters, I guess, are unavoidable, but I guess one thing to consider if you are living and working in the regions is how these impacts can actually be long-lasting in ways that you wouldn't typically expect. I guess here's a photo. This was taken in September. This was around 6 months after the rainfall event, and this was just from a shallow excavation around 1 metre down where we just kept finding water, and this was left open for a very long period of time. So far I've touched on some of the timing constraints and some of the challenges, and what I'll do now is I'll show you some of the photos of the end product. This was the transfer station during construction. The site's looking obviously quite a bit different to what it was at the start. Here is the completed 4-bay transfer station, or 4 of the bays rather, just prior to commissioning and installation of the new bins. And here is a view of the transfer station shortly after commissioning, around about September of 2017. This nice aerial, which was provided by council, really captures the scope of the upgrades. As you can see, there's a brand new ring road which is divided into various areas which are being used by the community for various recyclables and resource recovery. There's the 4 sawtooth bins, and it's really resulted in improved traffic management on site. The other part of the project was the landfill itself, and this is shown in this slide here. As you can see, the corner of the transfer station is just to the side, and at the rear we have a new leachate pond, stormwater pond and landfill cell with that 5-year capacity as a minimum, more if some recycling measures go well. Here is a close-up view of the new landfill cell and also the new leachate pond. So generally all in line with modern standards. So some of the benefits, already councils are seeing improved recycling rates, and there's an opportunity for additional revenue streams following the upgrade. The design that was put in place and the final works are really robust and readily operable, and this is important because this creates opportunities for local staff to operate the site themselves, and it doesn't need to go to big contractors who live outside the regions. Customer service has improved and safety has definitely improved on site. Importantly, the environmental outcomes are significantly improved compared to what they were previously. So this captures the scope of the works, but it's nearly 5 o'clock. So I'll just leave you with a couple of slides, before and after. The top is before and the bottom is the new landfill cell just prior to filling. And of course here we have the comparison of the transfer station. So if I could leave you with one message today, it's that big projects are possible in the region and they can really deliver benefit. So hopefully this serves as a good example of what can be achieved, no matter what the size of the council. Thank you for your time.